So we're back, and this time we're jumping forward about 200 years and over to the Old Kingdom of Ancient Egypt after 2400 BC. Around this time, the ancient Egyptians built the Pyramid of Unas in an area of northern Egypt that some of you may have heard of called Saqqara. The pyramid texts were the largest collection of religious materials from this period. For those of you just joining us, I'm Sarah, and while I'm writing my books, I'm reading my way forward through time. I'm doing this in order to broaden my own and hopefully your understanding of why our species is the way it is. So please, join me in this oft-neglected repository of forgotten things as I continue to dig up more of our cultural heritage. This is the Memory Hole. Now, the pyramid texts, as I said before, are the oldest large collection of religious texts ever found in the world, and the oldest known copy is found in the Pyramid of Unas. This pyramid dates back to the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom and is one of the older examples and one of the smallest of the smooth-walled pyramids that were built in the burial grounds at Saqqara in northern Egypt. Some of you who remember your ancient history classes might also remember that Saqqara was made famous for another reason as well, as it is also home to the step pyramid of Djoser, which comes from the 3rd dynasty of the Old Kingdom. The 3rd dynasty dates back to around 2600, which is around the time Shuruppak was giving his instructions over in Sumer. The Unas pyramid complex is right next door to Djoser's, sitting just south of there, so if the Egyptian afterlife was a real thing, Djoser could have brought Unas some ancient Egyptian cookies to welcome him to the neighborhood. The special thing about the Unas pyramid and the others that house these texts is the religious utterances that were written all over its walls. This became a trend that continued through the 6th dynasty with the pyramids of Teti, Pepi I, Menrenra I, Pepi II, and a few of their wives, with at least one outlier, the pyramid of Kakare-Ibi in the 8th dynasty. The first instance of pyramid texts were discovered by Gaston Maspero in the burial chamber of Pepi I in the year 1880, while he was working in the area under Auguste Mariette. Those that existed in the Pyramid of Unas were discovered shortly after. Various archaeologists have attempted to fully translate the full collection, but there are a few snags to this endeavor that might make it ultimately impossible to make all of them accessible. As with the instructions of Shuruppak and the Kesh Temple hymn, there is no known complete text. And further, all the versions that have been found have sustained damage from the passage of time, vandalism, and whatever else can happen in the course of over 4,000 years. If you think about it, as with the instructions and the hymn, we are lucky we have what we have. Boy, are we ever. The translation I am using for this video is a compilation of the various texts from the 5th to the 8th dynasty that were produced by the Egyptologist Samuel A.B. Mercer in the year 1952. It is worth noting that while the date of the Unas copy is sometime between 2400 and 2350 BC, it has been hypothesized that they were composed before that, possibly as far back as 3000 BC. If that is the case, and Mercer certainly seemed to think so at the time he published the translation, then they are the oldest religious texts known. They were also apparently only for royalty, as no evidence of the text has been found in the tombs of any Old Kingdom aristocrats or commoners. It would only be during the time of the Middle Kingdom that nobles started using parts of it, and later in the New Kingdom that some of them were incorporated into the Theban Book of the Dead. The text itself ranges from reading like a manual for the different spells to an extended celebration of the deceased describing his revered place among the gods. It talks about the things he will need to do on the way to get to where the gods are and about what he can do once there. The descriptions can range from plain and clinical to grand and descriptive. For instance, there's an early hymn to the sun in utterance 587 in the text that sounds a bit like something you'd find in a biblical hymnal, except for ancient Egyptians. It reads a little something like this. To say, greetings to thee, Atum. Greetings to thee, Khepri, who created himself. Thou art high in this thy name of Ka. Thou comest into being in thy name of Khepri. Greetings to thee, eye of Horus, which he adorned with his 2 hands completely. He does not make thee hearken to the west. He does not make thee hearken to the east. He does not make thee hearken to the south. He does not make thee hearken to the north. He does not make thee hearken to those who are in the middle of the land, but thou hearkenest to Horus. It is he who adorned thee. It is he who built thee. It is he who settled thee. Thou doest for him everything which he says unto thee, in every place whither he goes. Thou carriest to him the fowl-bearing waters which are in thee. Thou carriest to him the fowl-bearing waters which are to be in thee. Thou carriest to him the gods which are in thee. It goes on for a little bit after that, but you get the idea. There's other entries that look like they're more like descriptions of what the priests are doing. You'll notice that in the writings on the walls, it'll often say at the beginning of certain entries the phrase, to say, which suggests that they were probably directions of what the priests and the people around them were supposed to say as they were carrying out these rituals. For 9b of utterance 12, to say, I give to thee thy head, I fasten for thee thy head to thy bones. And then utterance 14, to say, I give to him his eyes, that he may be satisfied, offering of food and drink. And 15, to say, Geb has given to thee thine eyes, that thou mayest be satisfied. 16, eye of Horus, 1 nim's jar of water. 17, to say, Thoth, he has given his head to him, a pitcher of water. 18, to say, he has caused it to be brought to him, 1 drink of water. Utterance 20, to say, Unis, I have come in search of thee, I am Horus, I have pressed for thee thy mouth, I am thy son, thy beloved, I have opened for thee thy mouth. He is the defender of his mother when she weeps for him. He is the defender of his mother when she weeps for him, the defender of her who is united with him. How good is the condition of thy mouth after I have adjusted for thee thy mouth to thy bones. And then to say 4 times, Osiris, Unis, I open for thee thy mouth with the thigh, the eye of Horus, 1 thigh. Utterance 21. To say, how good is the condition of thy mouth after I have adjusted for thee thy mouth to thy bones. And it kind of goes on like that. The texts, as you can tell, are not the easiest thing to read, as not all the words are translated, or they have been kept in as the ancient Egyptian, where a word doesn't exist for a thing in the present. But if you're willing to wade through it, it's a fascinating piece of history, not just for the document itself, but for everything that surrounds it as well. Another interesting thing you'll notice as you read through the text is that there is interplay between multiple sources for the original texts. There are parts that primarily include material introduced by adherents of Osiris, as opposed to material promoting the god Ra. It is believed that there were a couple of different religious centers developing in early Egyptian history. For the cult of Osiris, this was centered around Busiris and Abydos, while Ra's religious adherents were centered around Heliopolis. And if you thought the number of gods mentioned in the Kesh Temple hymn would keep you busy, you clearly are not familiar with the Egyptian pantheon. Did you think it was just going to be about the big-name gods like Ra, Osiris, and Anubis? You thought wrong. You'll also need to learn about Nut, and Shu, and Tefnut, and Sekhmet, and Seth, and Geb. The list goes on for a while, so I think we might be best served if I simply direct you to Ancient Egypt Online. If you need to brush up on your Egyptian gods as you're reading, I found a whole lot of information there on the various gods I discovered in the text. Even better, the person who run the site cites her sources. So if you want to read more about this stuff, you'll find more reading resources at the base of most of the pages. If you decide to read any of the books Jenny Hill decided to use, please tell me about them in the comments. Apart from my book research, which will most likely be on more contemporary topics, I'm still back here in the BC years, but if I ever reach the 20th century in my explorations, I'd love to take a look at them. They sound interesting. On the same note, backtracking to Auguste Marietta and Gaston Maspero, they also wrote books about their findings, so don't be afraid to track down entries from their bibliographies either, if you think what they have to say about their discoveries might be up your alley. If you do, tell me about them too. I want to hear about it. Also, if you're interested in hieroglyphics or you just want to send Imhotep back to his tomb like the bad boy he was in the Mummy movies, Samuel A.B. Mercer, the guy who translated these texts, also wrote a handbook on reading ancient Egyptian. How fun is that? Another helpful bit of Egyptian lore to brush up on would be the anatomy of the Egyptian soul. Now, there are plenty of resources down below if you want to read more, but as described by reshfm.org, an Egyptian conception of the soul can be understood as being made up of the ba and the ka, with the ba being that which makes up a human's personality, sometimes claimed to be the psyche as well as what holds things like urges for food, drink, and sex, so it can be said to have a physical element as well. Interestingly, it has sometimes been depicted in forms ranging from a phoenix to an erect phallus. The Ka, on the other hand, was sort of like the life force or immortal spirit found within a soul. They'd also build these special statues to the Ka that represented this life force as the deceased. Unsurprisingly, these are typically referred to as Ka statues. One of the biggest drawbacks of the text is that there is still a lot about ancient Egypt that we just don't know, and have to make guesses. A great example of this is the part of the text relating to the opening of the mouth ceremony, and by the way, JSTOR has a pretty interesting article on what a tool called a piskif, however it's pronounced. It was a tool mentioned in proximity to and believed to have been used during the opening of the mouth ceremony, along with a set of special bottles and jars. Anne Macy Roth, who wrote the article, had some pretty interesting thoughts on what that was all about. But the point is that we've made educated guesses as to what was going on, but there is still some dispute about the particulars. You'll need a JSTOR account to access this article, but I thought it was interesting, so feel free to check it out. I definitely recommend reading these texts for yourself. I feel like I learned a lot. Also, before we go, some of you who saw the first video may be wondering why I didn't talk about the Palermo stone. Well, here's why. It turns out the Palermo stone is a fragment of a larger text called the Royal Annals of the Old Kingdom, and a full translation is a little bit harder to come by. My book budget does not include funds for a book that's the same price as the sofa I'm reading it on, so I'll need to go pick it up from a university library, and that's going to take a little time. But don't worry, you'll get to hear the results of that trip next video. Let me know your thoughts and book recs in the comments, and until next time, like, subscribe, stay curious, and keep on digging. See you soon!